There's no substance more essential for life or more precious in its scarcity than plain old water. And more often, the needs of man are in conflict with the needs of wildlife. Hi, I'm George Page for Nature. This week we have a new film by Hugh Miles about an internationally important wetland, 50 square miles of marsh and lake in Tunisia called Ichkeul. It's the only source of fresh water to be found in Tunisia between the vast expanses of the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean Sea. Apart from being an important habitat for such creatures as otters, jackals, and wild boar, it also sustains hundreds of thousands of migrant birds on their long journey between Europe and Central Africa. Ichkeul's fresh water is also essential for the people of Tunisia. And for a time, it looked as though the needs of wildlife would have to be sacrificed for those of the people of that parched land. But a deceptively simple solution has recently emerged, and it looks as though the terrible choice between people and wildlife may not have to be made. From the shimmering heat of the Sahara, Tunisia stretches north towards the Mediterranean. Follow that route, and before the sea comes into sight, a traveler's eyes are startled by this unexpected vision. No mirage, but real water, fresh water, and it's unbelievably alive, a spectacle of tens of thousands of birds. Lake Ichkeul. It ranks with the greatest wetlands of the Mediterranean, the Cotodognana of Spain, or the watery Camargue in France. Though it's less famous, the wildlife of Ichkeul is just as impressive. But jackals cool off in these shallows, an image that speaks of Africa. Blizzards of birds from many countries need the sanctuary of this lake, for there's only one other like it left in North Africa. And like wetlands around the world, this remarkable place faces an uncertain future. It's a national park, but its waters, so rich in wildlife, are also needed by the increasing human population, presenting Tunisia with a dilemma. A view from space in infrared shows how close Lake Ichkeul is to Europe. Here, Africa reaches into the Mediterranean. This immense oasis on the threshold of the Sahara has become a natural focus for birds from two continents. The character of its waters changed dramatically with the seasons. Ichkeul is fed not only by 6 rivers from the surrounding hills, but at times from the nearby sea, producing the transformation that makes the story of Ichkeul so unusual. In summer, the lake's as salty as the sea, but after the rains fall in early winter, the rivers flow into the lake, filling it and flooding the surrounding marshes, and diluting the lake's salty water. When the lake level is high, excess water flows out into the Mediterranean, flushing salt from the system, and the lake becomes fresh water. Rainfall ceases in the spring, and the hot sun accelerates evaporation. The water level drops, and the salinity increases. At the end of the hot, dry summer, the lake level is so low that salt water flows back in from the sea, making the lake even more salty. As winter approaches, the process is repeated. The rains fall, salt is flushed out, and the lake becomes fresh again. Such a huge quantity of fresh water is priceless to the people of a desert land. Inevitably, there are plans for damming the rivers. 2 dams are already built. But restricting the flow of rainwater into the lake could destroy the subtle balance of life. A scheme has been devised that may allow both people and wildlife to flourish. At the lake's outflow, a floodgate or sluice will hold back the overflow of winter rains and control the summer inflow of seawater. Further action will be needed to meet the demand for fresh water by Tunisia's growing population and to protect the lake. Water is crucial here to both man and this wonderful natural heritage. Our year at Ichkeul begins in early December. The seasonal rains have already flooded the lake and marshes. It's an open invitation to travelers retreating from the northern winter, greylag geese. Just a day ago, these geese were feeding on the Austro-Hungarian border. Strengthened for their non-stop journey, they flew south, first skirting the Alps, then continuing past Rome and out over the Mediterranean. In one flight, they reach these welcoming waters. In recent years, more than 20,000 geese have been known to arrive. Ichkeul is winter quarters for almost all the greylags of Central and Northeastern Europe. The lake and marsh provide both a safe roost and abundant food. Plants that the greylags relish grow in the fresh water here. Their favorite is a bulrush with nutritious shoots and roots, plucked easily from the shallow water. The conquering Romans knew this lake of birds. It was a leisurely chariot ride from Carthage. The legionnaires hunted here, as poachers do today, even in a national park. This is not a serious disturbance to the geese because at present they have many other marshes around the lake in which to feed. But if the marshes are drained and the lake becomes too salty for their food plants to grow, the geese will be forced to plunder the farmers' fields. Up till now, both people and wildlife have benefited from their association here. Besides the greylags, some 200 other kinds of birds share Ichkeul, wintering here or passing through from Central Europe, Arctic Russia, or even as far away as Eastern Asia. 50,000 Eurasian widgeon may rub shoulders with 6,000 pintail, 30,000 common pochard, 170,000 Eurasian coot, 5,000 teal, and legions of mallard, garganey, and shovelers. This internationally important haven is irreplaceable. The open water of the lake is alive with Eurasian coot and pochard. The common pochard roost here by day. At dusk, many will leave to feed by night on the nearby sea. But here, so passive a crowd is an easy target for gulls that seek to snatch the weaker birds in the flock. Also scanning the lake edge for prey is a marsh harrier, one of the most important of Ichkeul's aerial hunters. Seeking the weak, the disabled, or unwary, her sudden wheeling shape puts the teal to flight. As winter gives way to spring, Ichkeul, by the end of March, is brimful of fresh water. This water will slowly become more salty, but the reed, Phragmites, tolerates that change, and these thick stands offshore will maintain good cover for the marsh harriers in the coming months. Some 55 pairs will nest here. So many pairs of marsh harriers proclaiming their individual territories are a sign that the national park is in good health. There are plenty of other creatures thriving here. In time, food for the harriers' young. The male performs this display. It serves both to discourage rival males and to attract a mate to the place he selected for the future nest. Later, he demonstrates his ability to support a family by presenting her with a choice catch. Drawn to her mate's display, she swoops toward him to accept his gift. It's the male's job to establish the nest. He breaks down reeds, shaping a rough platform clear of the water and isolated from plundering jackals, mongooses, and other predators of this African wilderness. Mating takes place on the shore, this female's inviting the male to follow her to the chosen rendezvous. Both male and female will work on the nest building, but the male does most of the fetching and carrying. The female arranges the nest material as he wings back to the shore for more. Besides the marsh harriers, many others claim territories in the reed beds. One is a very early bird. These are green-backed gallinules, attempting to move in where rivals already hold sway. They not only nest in the reeds, but eat them too. Dwindling in numbers in the western Mediterranean, the green-backed gallinules rely on Ichkeul for their survival. Other water birds defend territories within the reeds, including aggressive Eurasian coots. Several pairs of great-crested grebes nest around the shores of Ichkeul. They find plenty of fish to feed their young. Purple herons migrate north to nest in the marshes. Unlike most other herons, they nest not in trees, but on a platform built in the reeds. They share the marsh with resident fish-eating little egrets, very similar to our own snowy egret. The oddest beak at Ichkeul. The spoonbills, flattened mandibles, filter shrimp, and other crustaceans from the tepid waters. Shallow water provides extensive hunting areas for gray herons and little egrets. This one dances on its yellow feet in an attempt to disturb prey from the cover of the muddy ooze. For migrating birds, Ichkeul is critically placed on the flyway that includes this fearsome void, the Sahara Desert. The desert is 250 miles south of the lake. But it's spring, and out of the mirage come swallows flying north. Lake Ichkeul is in their path. Across 1,200 miles of desert, through sun-baked days and freezing nights, feeding where they can, pausing where they must, they move in response to rhythms within their bodies, dictating this to be the season to battle north to breed. The blossom of broom colors the threshold of Ichkeul. The swallows dive down to feed on the insects in this oasis of flowers. Blue borage and yellow verbascum mingle with cobalt chicory and pink oleander, orange marigolds, and purple gladioli, the floral pageant of Ichkeul in spring. There are butterflies that have wintered here, painted ladies. Soon they and the swallows will be flying north to Europe. But the plain tiger, sometimes known as the African monarch, will stay and lend its colors to this Tunisian splendor. It's April, and the lake is still fresh and full. Restless to complete their migration, the swallows make a final sweep for aerial plankton, the insects dancing over the water. Beyond this oasis lies a sea and another continent to cross. They're ready now to funnel across the headlands of this North African coast and to fly over the Mediterranean. Not all complete so grueling a journey. Those that do will, in just 5 months, come winging back across this historic sea. When the Romans came to this land, they knew the harvest here would be early. It's only May, but already the sun has ripened the crops that were planted before the winter. In their time, the Romans made this the granary of Europe. Marsh harriers probably stooped among the drying haystacks then as they do today. The harriers now have young, and he's hunting for other small birds that everywhere are fledging from the nest. Farming here is not intensive. The methods used are even advantageous to the wildlife. Larks nest readily in these fields, and some of their offspring will fall prey to the harrier. The male, plucking the feathers from prey on the lakeshore, is seen by the female passing overhead. He flies up to pass the food to her. And curiously, both head off not to the reed bed, but inland. This year, there's been an exceptional amount of rainwater running into the lake, and the first nest became flooded. The harriers settled again in this lakeside field, taking advantage of the traditional style of farming. It's the female that brings food to her 2 offspring. The male concentrates on hunting, but later, as the youngsters grow, she may help him. Now, about 3 weeks old, the chicks are just about able to feed themselves. There's vigorous competition to get hold of the dead chick, and a good deal of body snatching takes place before one young harrier gets the meal. In a few weeks, they'll be flying and catching their own meals around the drying lakeshore. Already, there's a hint of the transformation to come. Moisture is driven off by the sun, leaving the lake a little shallower hour by hour. The water is still fresh enough for frogs and for those that like to eat frogs. Carrying several frogs in its crop, the white stork returns to its inland nest on the roof of a farmhouse. Unlike the harriers, stork parents always take turns hunting and looking after the young. The bird on nest duty performs an elegant greeting display for its returning mate. Up come 5 frogs, 5 meals for 4 chicks. It's hard to see which of them wins the odd frog. These white storks have come from the plains south of the Sahara. It's still only May, but at Ichkeul they can breed early because of the abundant food. The Tunisian farmers welcome them because they eat the pests in their fields. And according to the Koran, the stork is a good bird anyway. Some believe they go to Mecca when they disappear back across the Sahara. As the lake level steadily falls under the hot sun, the lush Potamagitan weed can be seen. It provided winter greens and seeds for coots and ducks, feeding their hungry thousands. Now, for a while, it becomes a nursery for sea fish. As the water becomes a little more salty, mullet and eels hide in it. It's one of Tunisia's more prolific fisheries. Beside the gray herons that live here or pass by, people make a living from these waters. The existence of this rewarding fishery helps guarantee a future for the delicate natural regime of this remarkable lake. Subtle changes are taking place. Islands are revealed as the waters evaporate and become more salty. On them, little terns in from the Mediterranean can nest. They catch fish too, which serve as courtship gifts as well as food. The male offers them to the female to help cement the pair bond and bring the female into full breeding condition. This is a critical time in the lake's annual cycle. The brackish water is now very shallow. The bed of the lake is below the level of the adjacent sea, so there comes a time when the flow of fresh water out of the lake ceases, and water comes in from the sea through this eastern channel. It's here that hydrologists and engineers are recommending the construction of a sluice. The sluice would control the loss of fresh water to the sea, as well as the inflow of seawater into the lake. A fish pass would allow fish, such as these mullet, to and from the lake to breed. Control at the lake's outflow has become essential now that the inflowing rivers, such as this one, the Sejnan, are being dammed. If all 6 rivers are tapped to supply cities and irrigation schemes, much less fresh water will reach Ichkeul each winter. The annual floods will no longer scour the channels between the tamarisk bushes, and the visiting bee-eaters may not find water-worn banks in which to excavate their communal nests. Bee-eaters feed on many insects, but that food will become less plentiful if Ichkeul is allowed to become a salt lake. The bee-eaters bask in the warm sun, which heats and stirs the arid air, drawing yet more water out of the lake. A baked expanse of mud emerges, the legacy of the dwindling lake. Now, in one of those curious patterns of nature where landscape, time, and life suddenly find a new harmony, a transformation occurs. So shallow is this basin that the very slightest wind can shift the salty waters over the mud, mimicking a tide that creeps across the flats. Few real tidal mudflats occur in the Mediterranean, so approaching flocks of migrant shorebirds are attracted instead to this inland phenomenon at Ichkeul. The salty water allows creatures brought in by the seawater as plankton to flourish on the mudflats. Shorebirds find ample food here, synchronized with the birds' need to sustain themselves on their autumn journeys. Visiting avocets join resident marble teal, a rarity in the Mediterranean, but numerous at Ichkeul in the late summer. Varying leg lengths and beak shapes allow different kinds of birds to reach different kinds of prey, so the mudflats feed a wide range of shorebirds. Some will stay for the winter, and others move on south. Little stints are outdug by the curlew sandpiper's longer bills. Redshanks and greenshanks find that Ichkeul provides what the Mediterranean cannot. With most other North African freshwater marshes drained, Ichkeul is now a true oasis. It's the only permanent natural wetland of this type left in Tunisia. It plays a major international role by sustaining this vital link on the late summer migration paths. This past summer, this avocet raised its young in Italy, Austria, or perhaps Hungary. Many avocets overwinter here, feeding well on shrimps. Perhaps the most elegant of the wading birds is the black-winged stilt. A few nest here where the rivers flow into the lake. This is a young bird fledged here. Others will have come from Europe or the Mediterranean islands. As the summer progresses, the water becomes more salty than the sea, and the marsh sandpipers and avocets find themselves moving among this giant forest of newly arrived legs. At this time, every year, greater flamingos bring their own brilliance to Ichkeul. In some years, as many as 5,000 arrive to filter salty water for brine shrimp. They bring the color of the East African lakes to this coastal wetland. Most of Tunisia's flamingos come from the Camargue or southern Spain, though one was seen wearing a ring put on by the Russians in Kazakhstan. They're in good color here, deriving plenty of pink pigment from the shrimps they eat. Some may stay for the winter, but if autumn rain forms saline pools farther south near the Sahara, they may be drawn away. The baked fields of autumn are brightened by flocks of cattle egrets in pursuit of insects. At this time of year, they feed on grasshoppers and grain, but in summer, when they nest in dense colonies in the reeds, they feed their young on frogs and small fish. Now they forage restlessly to prepare for winter. The marsh harriers are also after the grasshoppers and the many small birds, larks, sparrows, and goldfinches, reaping their own harvest of the spilt grain or the seeds of dried flowers. These are the young harriers, now learning how to take care of themselves. The young male seems confused by the mass of small birds flocking at this time of year. It's as though he just can't make up his mind which to catch. These noisy flocks of starlings assemble every evening. They've come from Central Europe to winter here, using the lakeside reeds for a roost. By day, there are ripening olive groves to plunder, and a well-fed starling makes a good meal for the harrier. They're a good catch, too, for the lanner falcon, down from the rocky mountain that overlooks the lake. The starlings wheel in alarm, but the lanner isn't distracted. He swoops low, dividing the flock, and then up through them from the right. There. The harriers haven't gone hungry either. At dusk, they return from the fields to the reed beds. Unlike in the breeding season, when harriers are territorial, in autumn, a dozen or so can be seen roosting close together. Resident and migrant harriers share these winter quarters. Only when the harriers are bedded down for the night will another shy reed dweller venture out. More easily heard than seen, the secretive water rail exploits the last glimmer of day to hunt. The North African night envelops the lake, haunted by jackals. When Dido was queen of Carthage, the Ichkeul dawn echoed with the royal hunt as wild boars were dispatched by princely spears. This is a youngster. Wild boar are born in nests in the cover of the marsh, or on Ichkeul's wooded mountain, from which came marble for the palaces of Carthage. Along these shores also move shy and cautious otters, thriving on the riches of this marsh. But these mornings, the jackal catches a different scent in the air. The first sun is shrouded by gathering clouds, as an age-old anticipation spurs movement toward the mountain. Families of wild boar flee to higher ground. A mongoose, too, joins the exodus from the marsh as a storm gathers, the first of many. salt lake yields to the flush of winter rain. The torrents are laden with soil from the fields, providing nutrients to enrich the waters, but hastening the natural filling of the lake with silt. All wetlands have their own finite lives, which may last for thousands of years, but rapid change can bring catastrophe and a loss of ancient biological riches that can't be restored. In a year of good rains, Lake Ichkeul expands quickly. Fresh water surges down from the Atlas Mountains through the 6 rivers. Across the hard-baked mud, the water crawls back into the marshland, reactivating it for the hordes of waterfowl soon to darken the northern sky and driving jackals into the hills. All this could change forever. Already 2 of the 6 rivers have been dammed to hold and divert much-needed water beyond Ichkeul to a thirsty, hungry, and growing nation. A 3rd dam is already started, and 3 more are planned. But to conserve the lake, its wildlife and fishery, some water must be allowed to pass on into the lake. If the influx of fresh water is stopped, the resulting salt lake would lose its ability to produce and support such abundant life, a loss to Tunisia and to us all. The dramatic spectacle of the wildlife of Lake Ichkeul inspires a desire for the lake's protection. Tunisia has recognized its virtues and pledged itself to conserve the lake by signing 3 international agreements. Ichkeul is now a World Heritage Site, a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, and an international Ramsar wetland. It's the only natural place in the world to be so protected. To conserve this invaluable living asset, Tunisia needs to implement the existing plan to control the fine balance between fresh and salt water. When Tunisia fulfills its pledges in this way, it will be to the lasting advantage of both wildlife and people. Then Ichkeul will be not just the last haven between sea and sand, but a symbol of the way this planet can and should be shared.
Stay with 11 now for a behind-the-scenes look at a unique part of Britain's royal heritage. The Queen and her royal horses is next, here on 11.